Hey folks, welcome to another edition of Arting Out with Scott Fischer. Today we're going to talk about my latest painting, Out of Your Shell. I started with a rough drawing done in Alchemy. It's a free program you can get, but it's basically like a Sharpie drawing. It's very rudimentary, makes me make my marks really simple, and I can't get too detailed in it, so that keeps the ideas flowing. Tightened it up a bit in Photoshop, and that was probably 3 or 4 levels before I got here, and now we're doing like the final underdrawing, I would call it. You can see that I'm still making adjustments based on what I want to see. I lower the eyes, I move things around, but I'm already considering the planes of the face in my hatch work, and basically I'm sort of making myself a guide map for when I start to make it traditional. Originally, oh look at that, this liquefy in Photoshop, one of the best tools ever. It means you can just draw it and hammer it out, and then you can go adjust it and make it look right. I love that. I did a cool thing where I matched her bun to the shell of the snail. Get a little hand on there. I was going to do it this small actually in square, but I kind of liked it so much I thought I should extend the composition and give it a little bit of extra effort. I got my star set up, had a pretty good idea of where I was going with this. So we extended out the composition. I did this cool thing with wrapping around the body, like a cocoon almost. The white star over the eye was going to be the crazy thing I didn't know how to do. Here's the equipment, Dura-lar matte. I use the matte, I don't use the wet Dura-lar. Robert Simmons white sable brushes. I use these liner brushes, they're really long. And I'm almost painting with the stuff at the tip of the brush, using FW ink. This entire piece is FW ink. I've transferred the drawing onto Dura-lar, so it's the transparent material with a 2H pencil, or a 4H pencil actually. And now it's time to get to work. I'm using Nico KKO dip pins, and I'm dipping them in the FW ink. I've custom mixed a bunch of different containers of it. Various sort of muted gray, browns and greens and stuff is what I'm going to be dipping into. And I'm going to just attack the face right off, man. Let's go ahead and just rip the Band-Aid off. Let's do the hardest part first. If I jack it up, I know I got to start over. And if I don't jack it up, awesome. The rest should be easy, right? Maybe not, but hopefully the rest will come easy after you get the face done. You can see that I've indicated the hatch work that was in my underdrawing, and you might think it feels redundant to kind of draw it now for what, the 5th time, but not really. It's oddly zen and meditative for me, and every time I do it I kind of correct the line a little bit here and a little bit there and really kind of get invested and fall in love with the piece. The idea is you want to love every inch of it. You want to know every inch of your painting. You don't want to just like goof off on a part of it. And man, this is one way to get to know it. I guess I'm not afraid of commitment. Jump on the hand next, usually the next hardest thing. So we'll go ahead and nail that hand, get it out of the way. I'm using the exact same color of FW ink to ink this entire thing. I mean, the figure. I will obviously change it up in a little bit to other stuff. But as far as the figure, it was pretty much all dipping into the same little container. I knew that I wanted this to be a hatching painting. I wanted to not do a lot of brush work on the front of this. I really want to keep it to a minimal. I wanted to see if I could really let line work speak, because I love hatch work so much, and how much of that can just do the job without having to go in and render and all that kind of stuff, with oil paint or anything. The snail is done in a slightly different color. It's still muted, but it's more of an olive green, a lot of drab green now. Of course, that's to get it to bounce off of the figure a little bit more. With all that hatch work, I didn't want it to vanish into the figure and just look like it was part of the figure. That's something we'll have to address throughout this piece. Always pulling those lines to help inform planes. I'm not just shading, and I try to get that across to people. It's not just shading, it's actually pulling form. Time to get on these flowers. This was the most labor-intensive part of the entire piece. Oh my God. I think I was inking flowers for like 2 days. I don't know. That's what it felt like. Maybe it was more. I don't even know. But you'll notice that I've lightened the value of these lines. I don't want them to compete with the figure or the snail. So I've added more titanium white to probably whatever I used on the skin color there. I probably lightened that up. I'm changing some things on the flowers. Usually it's wherever you see them kind of curl over and do that kind of thing. That's me kind of breaking away and wanting to get a little bit more form. More importantly with the flowers and when doing something with a pattern, because sometimes when people use patterns it feels like things are totally isolated from each other, right? But if you can do a little bit of overlapping, and if you notice like right on that shoulder, you see how that little petal comes over the shoulder? There's areas throughout this piece that I will do that. Things from behind will come in front and vice versa. And that is how you get it to sort of look like they're all in the same world and she's not just standing in front of a big drawing. One way to do it anyway. And we're just working it. That's what we do. Sometimes, guys, it's just, you gotta grind through it. There's parts of your painting that the fun was the face, yay! And now it's like time to do the flowers. And I'm enjoying the flowers and I'm glad to be there, but oh my God, this is work. I'm not too concerned about line weight on these flowers. But you might notice I've actually shifted colors now. So I added a little bit more violet purple to the gray as we transition down. I was going to do it all in the same color ink like I did the figure. I think it's partially I was getting bored of doing flowers, so I was like, oh, let me at least change up the color. But also I just visually wanted you to feel like there was a little bit of a difference there. I'm thinking about how I might attack these flowers later. These little stamen, the little things in the center of the flowers, like I'm going to want them to be a little different than the rest of the flower as we progress. Here we go, still with the violet. We're on the other side now. Trying to remember, there's like these wraps that go across her body that I'm not sure how I'm going to handle. And I'm just trying to remember that they need to kind of disappear into these flowers and come in and out. That's the whole thing, right? It's almost like she's being like back into the flowers a little bit, or they're kind of creeping around her. In a moment here, you're going to see me start to knock in some of the negative space. There's a little penciled X on the little spot you'll see, and I'll fill that in. Those little X's are where I'm going to fill in the paint. There I go. And you can see how much darker it gets as it dries. It's almost like gouache in that sense. It's not always that dramatic, but I don't know, something with the violet gray, man, it really got darker when I did it. Now we've moved on to adding a bit of alizarin crimson into this gray. I'm often using the same gray actually. I'm just slowly diluting it, adding more white, adding a little bit more colors because we're at the top of the piece now. So I want there to be a it's like the ice cream with the strawberry vanilla chocolate, right? I want like the kind of red gray at the top, and then you'll see we're transitioning down into the green gray now. And then as we keep rolling down the piece, we'll wind up in the violet gray. But notice how even at this stage, the figure is standing out on top of that gray, and that's why value is so important. It's less to do about the color and more to do about the value. And you will hear this all the time, but color gets all the credit, but value does all the work. Okay, time to cut in some of the negative space at the top. Whereas I went dark with the negative space between the flowers at the bottom, at the top I wanted to let almost like a vignette, almost like a little bit of the white come through. Now, Dura-lar is a translucent frosted material. It's like a mylar. I've slipped a piece of toned paper between the Dura-lar, well, underneath the Dura-lar, and that way I can see where the white is going down. I've turned over the painting, which I always do with the Dura-lar pieces, and I'm painting on the back now. I knew I wanted that flower to be, the big star behind her to be a bit opaque. And so I decided to go ahead and do it on the back side, and then if I want it super opaque, I could then do it on the front side as well. Those Robert Simmons liner brushes, you can see how that it just bends and flex and just fills it in nicely. You lay it down on its side and it can get a little bit even wider, almost like a flat. Love those things. So I'm filling in the wraps that go around her. I'm not exactly sure I'm going to handle these, but I thought at a minimum I'll start them with the white, but I kept it sort of translucent. Where there are areas of translucency in this paint, and I put another layer on top of that, the new layer of paint will bleed through from the front. You can actually see my printed under drawing on the left there. Okay. Now, Using a makeup sponge and some of the titanium white, I'm actually scrubbing the back of the piece. There's the makeup sponges for you. And the idea behind this is that it's going to create just one more layer of frosting, so the work I do on the back will be subtle. Any final darkness I want to put on the front of this piece. It also allows me to do strokes and texture within the white. So when I actually put some darker values on the back of this, and you can see me testing the darker values right there, and that now I'm turning over the Dura-lar so I can see how those darker values I threw down will show up. And this is me thinking about what's going behind the flowers, how well those lines show up on top of the flowers. And I'm being very careful about this, but you can also see how the white that I scrubbed on with the makeup sponges is actually kind of ghosting it out and adding yet another layer of texture. And if you know anything about me, you know I'm a texture junkie. All right, time to commit. Get the big inch wide Robert Sables, white sable, and I just start banging out the flats behind there. I go back to the liner brush when I'm getting close to the figure and things got to be a little bit more controlled, a little bit more tight. Like I said, once you can use the side of those liner brushes to actually lay down some pretty wide passages if you want to, but as we get out to the edge, we go ahead and hammer it. Now notice I've painted over the star. Remember, the star's already white under there, so it's almost like it's masked off. I don't need to worry about the star right now. You're not going to see what I just did on the front side. I've mixed up a green-gray, probably just a lighter version of what I inked the snail in, and I'm just going to ink up the snail. Look how it dries a little bit different than it went down wet. And then it has a second value. I added a little bit more titanium to that, and we brought up the value a little bit more, so there'd be some differentiation. I started making paint on pieces of paper and sliding it underneath the Dura-lar. This is for the hair. See, that little swatch showed up underneath the hair there. That taught me what values to do. But I wanted a transition. This is a gradient that I'm doing. I've used the green from the snail at the bottom of the hair, and then slowly I'm working some of the purple from the bottom into that. You got to work fast. This is acrylic. It's going to dry fast, so I make a puddle of it, man, and I am moving when I put that stuff down, so it'll have a nice transition. But just hammer in the darks really quick on the hair. It's like a rudimentary sort of rendering that happens. Now we're going to start thinking about her skin. Got this purple going. I lay it under the face to see how the lines of the face are going to play on top of that. Made some adjustments, and here we go. Blasting it on. It was okay to me that this was going down a little transparent. In fact, I purposely kept it more transparent around her head. You can see that. The reason is now I'm doing the white. Now the white is the final move, right? It's like final. And when I scrub this on, it's like it's solid now. So that white is going to be the most opaque thing on the back. And when you flip it over, around the face there where it was translucent, it's now going to be a little bit lighter, and there'll be a bit of a gradient, and we'll see some textures and some strokes and stuff. And this is the flip. Woohoo! And now we get to actually check out the front. Pretty stoked with this so far, man. You can see the streaks. See those streaks underneath there? That's a combination of the thin makeup sponge stuff, the streaky middle value I put down, and then the white that went on top of everything else. I'm outlining the straps and the star, and that turned out to be a good solution. I'm glad I waited on this. At one point I was going to do dark line around that, and I'm really glad I didn't. I think graphically it plays well. It ties those straps to the star above. Now we go in and we make our value adjustments. So I'm doing more hatch work. I'm probably adding a little bit darker stuff to that, that custom mixed color, and we're rendering her up, man. We're staying in those darker values. I know I'm going to go lighter in a second here, but right now I'm staying in those darker middle values. It's pretty remarkable if you establish a middle value, you go one step darker and one step lighter, and at that point you decide where you need to go next. But you can actually accomplish a lot with 3 values, and that's essentially what I'm doing here. Thickening up some lines, pulling some forms. My hand is all over the place, right? Because the piece is starting to talk to me now. It's starting to be like, all right, man, now we're there. Now you can just start react, this, and the time of tediousness is done. This is just riffing. It's like a solo on a guitar, I guess. Doing the highlight stuff now on the snail. So on the body of the snail, you'll see that it's gone up a stage in value. But he is primarily 3 values. There are some nooks and crannies stuff where it got a little bit darker. Some of that's just the paint being thicker in those lines. Some of it is I might have actually made the paint a little bit darker. Time for the face, man. Let's render it up. Now the cool thing about the white is it's sort of transparent if you use it lightly. The hardest thing for me to figure out was the star around her eye. I was going to mask it off and glaze the entire star, and then I thought, wait a minute, now that I've got this white, let me just try to hatch within that star and see if that's enough to separate it off. And oh my God, it was. I'm so glad I didn't wait, because man, if you do a mask and then it bleeds underneath, you can just get a mess. And again, I wanted everything on the front of this to almost be line art. Well, I didn't quite succeed in that. You'll see in a second, but primarily this is a drawing, right? And think of it like that. Oh, I had to go darker, by the way, with the purple behind those flowers. It's a balance thing, right? It's like when you put down your cup of coffee on a spoon and you feel like your cup of coffee is going to spill over, so you got to grab it and correct. All right, so the darker values up by the hair made me go, all right, I need to do some darker values at the bottom to balance this thing out. I lost my train of thought a second ago, but that's okay. I'm sure we'll find it again. Oh, that's the thing. Thing about Dura-lar and doing this, it's almost like working on custom tonal paper. This is our final list we have to go through. If you've worked on grayscale paper, it's like that, except every zone has its own value and its own texture and stuff, and then I just go darker or go lighter. You've used your white charcoal pencil. That's what we're talking about. Time for final accents in that eye there. There it is. Accent eye. Blam. I love it when we get to the list part. It's hard to remember everything. There's so many moving pieces to painting sometimes. Want a little bit of color in the eye, so in goes the green. And a little bit of highlighting on the green. There we go. Green eye. Scratch. Sweet. What's next? Ah, this is where I did wind up doing some glazing. This is really the only opaque painting other than the white and the negative space on the front. Everything else was handled with line, but I needed that shell to bounce a little bit more, separate a little bit more, and I needed a shadow underneath the neck of the snail a little bit to get it to pop. And a glaze wound up working for that. Because if you think about it, I couldn't go on the back anymore because the back is covered with the white. So any value changes, I got to make, everything's got to happen on the front now. But once I did that, I felt confident to go in with the Robert Simmons White Sables and start dry brushing a little bit of extra value on some of the other areas. So when you get up on it, you'll see that there's actually, this is pretty streaky stuff where the bristles have separated a little bit, and you know, you pinch the paint off the tip of it, and then you kind of lightly dust it almost. And then I was able to get some accents on the hair, and you know, the lips, and some different things under the chin. Now, I wanted this drawing to fade as I went down to the bottom. All of the detail and the hatch work and the serious action is going to happen at the top where the face is. And by the time you got to the bottom, I wanted it to literally be like a single line, right? But I had to go back down there and make some adjustments on the breast, give it a little bit more shadow down there, which we did. Boob shadow. Done. Still, I tried to keep it pretty light. I used a light touch down there. Now I'm doing little tiny circles on those stamen, because I wanted to somehow tie all the white that's in the middle of the piece to the rest of it. And so all those little tiny circles of white did that for me. Man, we're getting there. One more thing. The final move is to clean it up. I'm using like surgical Q-tips and nail polish remover. That's the only way to get FW ink off this stuff. It sticks really well. It's crazy good stuff. Heck, I use it on metal. It sticks well. So this is just the cleanup, a little bit of white FW ink to go in there, and this is it, folks. We are done with the piece. This is the final countdown. Anyway, there it is, and then you know we get a little shot of it scanning down. I was pretty thrilled with this. I succeeded in doing a very linear painting. Still want to call it a painting and not a drawing for some reason, but there it is. That's the final scan of it. So if you've enjoyed this, man, hit like, hit subscribe, spread the word. If you really enjoyed it, get yourself a print, limited edition of 100 on the website you see there, and have it on your wall to remember by. All right, guys, thanks so much for sticking with me and following along. Hope you enjoyed.